I'm glad Paul's name is spelled right.
Hey, and right before I had to make sure I checked that twice because I spelled it wrong the first time, but I got it right. So
the fire department
safe.
Fire department spelled it wrong yesterday in DC. I gotta.
So anyway, guys, I just want, welcome to, today is a very special day, and obviously it's been a very special day for you guys at Operation Gratitude. It's a day to commemorate and remember 9/11, and I'm honored to have two very special guests today who exemplify warriors both in the military as Marines and today as service warriors as leaders in Operation Gratitude. So I'm very honored to know you guys and be part of what you're doing in service to our country. Today being the 19th anniversary of 9/11, a day that changed America and the world. And we all remember where we were that day. I mean, the 9/11 attacks were 4 coordinated terrorist attacks on using 4 different planes by 19 Al-Qaeda terrorists. And it was the single deadliest terrorist attack in human history. And it was also the single deadliest incident for firefighters and law enforcement in the history of the United States, with over 343 firefighters losing their lives and 72 police officers being killed as well. So it was a day that we'll never forget today, the 19th anniversary, and we'll continue to remember. And obviously, beyond remembering, what's special about today is I get a chance to speak to 2 amazing human beings who both served in the military, but then have come out to serve in civilian life as well, and be an example for us. So before I just get started, I just want to play some taps and just take a minute to remember all those who lost their lives on that day that changed our lives. So Alexa, play. Thank you, guys. So to get started, I got 2 amazing guests here. I'm going to go through your stories about what you did back in the day, because apparently you both served from 2001 and 2003 together, the 2 of you, but how you got into the Marines, some of your personal story, and your story of service in the U.S. Marine Corps, but then also your new service to the nation with Operation Gratitude. So, we're going to start there, and just, the little bit I know about you, obviously, I know you both personally. I've been honored to meet you through a Operation Gratitude, what you call Ambassador Blue Shirt, Bob Donovan, who's someone I met at Operation Gratitude many, many years ago. And I would say he's a Vietnam veteran, an Air Force veteran, and a brother for life for me. And he's introduced me to some of the most amazing people I've met in my life, including the 2 of you guys. So I'm always honored and blessed because of that. And that's part of my experience. I know both of you guys, and I won't hold this against you, but both of you come from New Jersey. And so, as a New Yorker, that's okay. But Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Schmiegel here, who is retired Marine Corps, grew up in Toms River, New Jersey. Is that correct? So we'll start with you, Kevin. Maybe you can tell us your story. I know your family had a history of military involvement and service, and you're the only son in your large family to join the military as a Marine. So why don't you take it and start sharing a little bit of your story with the audience?
Well, first of all, thanks, John, for having us both. It's really an honor to be here, and really to know people like you and Bob Donovan, who you mentioned. We couldn't be more excited to join you, especially on a day like today with someone as patriotic as you and who cares so much about this country. I was joking with Paul earlier today or yesterday. The days are kind of blurring together this week, but I told someone that we pretty much have the same history and that we're kind of interchangeable. We can kind of tell the same story that not only includes growing up in New Jersey, but Paul, I won't steal Paul's thunder on his story, but you'll see some similarities. I don't want to talk too much about my career. I think a lot today is about our men and women in uniform serving overseas and our first responders. I'll just tell a quick story because it's a conversation piece. Everyone can see the sword behind my head. That's actually a Marmaluke sword, and it's carried by officers in the Marine Corps. That sword behind my head was actually carried by my father, who was a United States Marine in the 60s, and it's actually 57 years old, and was handed down to me the day I was commissioned in 1989. And I actually carried that sword in parades and ceremonies and at birthday balls that the Marine Corps celebrates every November 10th. And the day I retired in 1989, 20 years later, my dad had it put in that shadow box for me to keep in my office and to remember my time as a Marine. And I actually handed my sword over to him the day I retired. I was given a second sword when I was commissioned at the College of Holy Cross. It was handed to me by a guy named Joe Dunford, who was a major at the time. So we've exchanged it, and my dad hangs it in his office, which is kind of nice. I'm also the very proud father of a Marine. My son, Carl, enlisted in the United States Marine Corps 6 years ago, and he's just finishing up his enlistment now. He spent most of that time in the reserves. And it's a great source of pride for me to have 3 generations of Marines in my family. I'm a little bit older than Paul. I'll steal his thunder there. I'm actually a first Gulf War Operation Desert Storm service. And I served through 2009. I did not have to do a long deployment to Iraq or Afghanistan. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the 2 years that Paul and I spent in an artillery battalion together. But with that said, I was really fortunate throughout my career to be around some amazing leaders, to include Paul. We had general officers and colonels and young Marines who showed me how to lead too. I was really fortunate in the latter part of my career to work at the highest level of the Marine Corps. I was an aide de camp for a 4-star general who was our 32nd commandant and later became the 14th Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, which is essentially a dual hat where he was the commander of all NATO forces, 2 million troops, and he was also the commander of U.S. forces in Europe, General Jim Jones. At the time, as the U.S. European commander, he was responsible for 92 countries, and his AOR covered 2/3 of the waterways. So we spent a lot of time traveling. That was actually the busiest time in terms of deployments for me. We were on the road 285 days out of the year on average for 2 years. And was actually away from my kids more during those 2 years than I was any other time. And then at the very end of my career, I actually worked for Jim Jones again right before I retired. And I actually worked on the peace process in the Middle East. I lived in Israel for most of 2008. We weren't successful in bringing peace, but I learned a lot about the region, and it was a great way for me to transition out of the Marine Corps too, just because it gave me some unique perspectives that I may not have gotten in the normal operational tours that Marines do, and which Paul has a lot more experience with, and you can talk about. That's a good passing of the baton.
And just before you pass it over to Paul, and Paul shares that, and I introduce him, in that you served 20 years in the Marine Corps and also traveled to over 50 countries. Is that correct?
Yes, and that was largely attributed to my time with Jim Jones. So most of my travel with him was in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. So NATO at the time was taking over the training mission in Iraq. So I did go to Iraq with him 6 or 7 times, and to Afghanistan several times, and actually to Kosovo, probably more than that, because there was some very sensitive missions there and on the tail end of what happened in that region as well. So it was a fascinating time. I got to fly in a United States of America plane, not as big as Air Force One. It was a Gulfstream 5. I easily put more than 1,000,000 miles
Wow.
in that plane with him, and getting to go to places all over Europe, Africa, and the Middle East was exciting, but it was a challenging time. I did learn a lot about leadership then, lessons that I can apply today. I think it's interesting to walk in someone else's shoes. I think you gain a certain respect, admiration, and really empathy for what it's like to work that hard and have weighty decisions on your mind. And clearly, I'm not equating what I do at Operation Gratitude in terms of the decisions we make to what General Jones did in that position. But we work just as hard in our roles here with the organization because we care just as much about the mission that we have as we did the day we were Marines. So it's a really an honor to be doing what we do now, which I know I don't want to get ahead of myself because I'll talk the whole time. So.
Yeah, we don't want that to happen.
No.
So that leads into Colonel Paul Cucinotta, who is also from New Jersey, the Chief Operating Officer now of Operation Gratitude, and also has served for 27 years, if I'm correct, in the U.S. Marine Corps, and always, from what I read, always wanted to be a Marine. So he followed in good footsteps as well. So take it. We've heard Kevin's little experience, his life. Now, Paul, why don't you share some of yours with us?
Yeah, thanks. And I'll echo Kevin's remarks about you, John, and Bob Donovan, and getting to know great men like you that care so much about our country. That lifts our spirits too, and I think it has a lot to do with what we do every day, and it keeps us going. So thank you for that, and thank you for inviting us today. So yeah, I come from South Jersey, not far from where Kevin grew up. And then my family, when I was young, moved to the West Coast. I did most of my growing up just outside of Seattle. My dad too was a Marine, but only for a short time. He had a really bad eye condition, and he eventually got medically separated from the Marine Corps. And I think my dad passed away a couple of years ago, but his only regret was the fact that he didn't get to stay in the Marine Corps. He was never a man to live by regrets. He always looked ahead what the next day had to offer, but he really missed what he thought his calling in life was, which was to be a Marine. So I grew up just hearing story after story about Marines, to include uncles and cousins of his who served in World War II, particularly in the island hopping campaigns in the Pacific. So from the youngest age, I knew that I wanted to be part of that, right? Part of the Marine Corps. And one of my most favorite mementos from my childhood is a letter that I actually received from the Marine Corps. I was one of those kids that, if you remember in the old magazines, they had those cards that you could fill out. If you're interested in the Marine Corps, fill it out here, right? That was the advertising campaign. So I would fill them out by the dozens. Must have drove my mom crazy because we would get all kinds of, mailers back to the house. And one of them that my mom saved said, "Dear Mr. Cucinotta, we appreciate your interest in the Marine Corps. However, since you are only 11 years old, we recommend you stay in school and come see us when you turn 17, right? And graduate from high school." So I've always wanted to be a Marine. Like Kevin, I came in just after college, went through OCS like he did, and I joined in 1992. And for the first almost 10 years of my career, it was kind of a peacetime mission, but we deployed. Right, my very first assignment was in a really rough spot, Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii, in an artillery unit there. But I was gone. I was off the island. We were in Hawaii for 3 years, but I was off the island for well more than 400 days. deployed mostly to the Western Pacific, but also off the island training everywhere from Okinawa, Japan, mainland Japan, Korea, and even on the west coast of the United States. So even in an environment where there's not a war going on, our servicemen and women are busy training and preparing for what may come. And that day came for us on 9/11 in 2001. And I distinctly remember I was on the rifle range at Camp Lejeune as a captain, and I was working at the time for a general officer as his aide de camp. And yeah, that's my son in that picture. I'll talk about him in a second. But I was working for a general officer who was the division commander at the 2nd Marine Division. And because of that, I had a cell phone. Back in 2001, not very many people carried cell phones. And my phone went off. I had just finished on the 500-yard line, which was the last string of fire for our qualification course. And I called back and I talked to the secretary, and she said, "Hey, listen, you need to get back here. The general needs you back here. Something really bad happened." I'm like, "Oh, geez," and I had no idea what that could have been until I started hearing the scuttlebutt, right? On the rifle range, people were already hearing about planes flying into the towers. And that really started a series of events there at Camp Lejeune. We didn't know what was happening, right? We were frightened for our families, we were frightened for our nation, and we all had this burning desire to get in the fight, as most Marines would. And then, that changed the way we thought. It changed the way we had force protection at our bases and stations around the country, and it changed the way we trained, right? And we prepared for war, and we've been at war ever since. I spent a part of my tour as a Marine. I spent time with the 75th Ranger Regiment as well, so serving with my Army brothers in a very unique capacity. And with that came multiple deployments to both Iraq and Afghanistan. And then later on in my career, I actually went back to the Middle East the last time in 2015 for a year, spent time all over the Middle East, this time as a colonel doing a much different job. It's funny, you put that picture up there of my son, Nick. They were little. I had 3 kids at the time on 9/11, and he was only a couple of years old. And it's interesting to see how we all serve for a different reason, right? So, I think he serves a lot because of me and because of his uncle Kevin sitting here. Kevin and I have known each other since 1996. So my kids grew up with him as well. And it's interesting as I look at other Marines who had joined, right? And by the time you get to the mid-2000s, and Marines and sailors and soldiers and airmen and Coast Guard men and women are deploying all over the country, many of whom went to Iraq and Afghanistan. If you ask these young men and women why they joined, they would tell you where they were, many of them, on 9/11. Some were in grade school, some were in high school, and they joined because they felt that calling to serve. So Nick had that same calling. He went to the Citadel in South Carolina, and he was commissioned last May as a Marine. He also followed in Kevin and my footsteps and is an artillery officer. As a matter of fact, he graduated from Fort Sill, which is where the Marine Corps and the Army have their schools for artillerymen. And he's on his way home right now. He just graduated. He's taking some leave. He's going to come home and then go to his first duty station also at Camp Lejeune. I have 3 other children, and my middle son, Nick's younger brother, has felt a call to service as well. He's still in college, but he completed the fire academy in his local town out in Harrisonburg, Virginia, as a volunteer firefighter. And as a matter of fact, he did the stairway challenge today, running the same level of stairs as the firefighters went up in the
Wow.
The towers there. And he sent some photos of that, which I'll post on social later on today. But it's amazing to see, and it's a great feeling of pride and satisfaction when you see your children like Carl Schmiegel, who joined the Marine Corps a couple of years ago, and now Nick, and then my son Joey, his call to serve as a firefighter. And those are the things that inspire us, and things that we'll talk a little bit more about today, and what drove us, Kevin and I both, to come to Operation Gratitude, to continue our service, because service doesn't end the day, at least for Kevin and I, didn't end the day that we retired from the Marine Corps, and it continues in that same level of patriotic fervor, but also this burning desire, or maybe more of a calling to serve. I think it's with us as a lifetime, right? And we always say once a Marine, always a Marine. So Kevin and I are both Marines, maybe not on active duty, and we don't put the uniform on every day, and maybe we don't shave quite as close as we did or get the same high and tight haircut that we always had, but the same heart is there every day. And I think that's what drives us to do the things that we do to serve and support the men and women who continue to serve, continue to have that calling to serve as military members or as first responders.
Well, I find that it's kind of amazing. I always say nowadays when I talk, I say God clearly had a bigger plan for my life than I had for my own. But one of the things that the doors that he opened up for me was when I had that experience for the first time with the military up close and personal, doing producing a project for the U.S. Marine Corps. And I got a chance to go to Camp Pendleton and go to Quantico, and I got to, get behind the scenes and meet all these amazing young Marines, their leaders. And I had never been up close with anybody in the military on that level ever before. And it was life-changing because I got to see, and I'm going to ask you about some of these like takeaways, but things about leadership, team, mindset, courage, service, all these things that were exemplified in the Marine Corps in practice. And I got to see all those qualities that I had never seen before in a group of people, because in society, you don't get to see that in many groups of people. So seeing all that changed my life and got me onto a path of being able to be of service to veterans in Hollywood. But if I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't be here today. So that's why I say, and what a great group to open up my mind and my heart to, but the Marine Corps, because it was the one that just kind of showed me what leadership and all these amazing qualities are. I'm going to ask you guys to talk about it because you lived it. And I just saw it as an outsider, as a civilian, taking a look at what you were about. But it affected me for a lifetime. And so, I'm blessed that I had that experience, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for that experience. So back to you two, you served together from 2001 to 2003. Maybe you can share some of that, and then share some of the qualities of service that the Marine Corps gave you that you continue now, and we'll get into Operation Gratitude, but those qualities that you take into your service today.
First of all, I'll start out just till we get into a rhythm here. I wasn't sure that was Paul's son. There's no resemblance there, so it's hard to say other than the name tag. I'm only being facetious. You have to introduce him as your son. So our time in the Marine Corps actually is dated back before we served in an artillery battalion together. And I might as well talk about that because it's just good to clear the air so people don't think of us as a CEO and COO. I mean, we're pretty much best friends. And that firefighter that Paul talked about is actually my godson, and Paul's godfather to my youngest son. So this tie is deep. And I posted something on Facebook the other day. Paul had posted a picture, and I used the term brother from another mother. I really believe that. Marines use the term brothers and sisters all the time, but it goes much beyond our service in an artillery battalion. We actually ran into each other for the first time at graduate school, and we were friends from afar. Let's just say that. We actually competed against each other in a lot of races. We knew each other, but not well. We really knew each other because we were racing on different teams. And we ran all these ultra races. We had that in common. We were both really into running. And Paul left a little bit before I did and got stationed at the Pentagon. And I was stationed in a place called Quantico, Virginia. But we actually lived a mile apart from each other. And I think our wives met in just I don't know, some environment. I don't even know where. And my wife came home and said, well, I met this really great lady today, Beth Cucinotta. Her husband, Paul's a runner. And I said, yeah, I know who Paul is. She said, you said you should run with him. I said, no, I don't want to run with him. But anyway, I went on a run that day, and it must have been a sign from God. I actually came down this hill. I twisted my ankle, And I'm like, okay, well, I need to get back in shape and I need to start running with people like me. And we started training for marathons together and actually ran a few marathons, Marine Corps marathons together. Paul will tell you that he ran faster than me, which is true. I must have had a bad day, but I mean, we started to go to each other's houses and literally every week would run 15, 20 miles together, have a barbecue. Our kids grew up together. And then we both got stationed at Camp Lejeune at the same time. And we grew closer. Paul was the aide for a general, and I went to the artillery battalion as the operations officer. And we had an incredible battalion commander. I mean, both our mentors, both our mentor in the Marine Corps, just an incredible man, the most prominent artilleryman in the whole Marine. Anyway, Paul got done with his time as the aide to the general, and I was looking for a replacement for me. So I got out of the hardest. Being an operations officer is the hardest job under this commander we worked for. So I pulled Paul in, and he became the operations officer. I became the executive officer. And I will say this I'll say two things. Paul, I can think of a third thing, but I'm not going to because that's what I normally do. The first thing is we were the best artillery battalion in the Marine Corps. And I don't say that lightly. I say that largely because Steve Hanscom was our battalion commander, but also because Paul was there too. And we, as the three leaders in the organization, we pushed that down to the lowest level of the unit. And we had the best majors, the best lieutenant colonel, the best majors, the best captains, the best lieutenants, all the way down to the best privates, because it became a culture, which is really what the Marine Corps is. And the second thing I would say is Paul is the greatest leader I've ever served with. I'm not saying that just to say it on a call, right? I mean, which is why it's so great, because I then got to hire him and got to serve with him again, which is another part of the story, which we'll talk about. But I don't have to really talk that much about the Marine Corps' history and tradition. You know, the words we use are honor, courage, and commitment. And we're very, very proud of our history, our traditions, and that culture, and the core values that we have. And it's because it's part of who we are. I mean, everything that we do, once a Marine, always Marine, Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Those aren't just words to us. I mean, this is born on the backs of men and women who served before us. And it's well documented from 1801, with the Marine barracks here, but from 1776, November 10th, 1776, all the way to today. You just have to read our history and you'll know that you could be talking to me or Paul, or you could be talking about the millions of Marines who served before us in places like Belleau Wood, Iwo Jima, Guadalcanal, and the list goes on and on and on, all the way to Iraq and Afghanistan and places like Fallujah. So it's not about any one person in the Marine Corps. When General Jones was the commandant, on his reading list, the commandant has a reading list. It's one of his favorite books was The Jungle Book. And I never really got it because I read The Jungle Book in high school, and then I read it again in college because I was an English literature major. And then I read it again as a Marine. And there's a line in there about, the strength of the pack is the wolf and the strength of the wolf is the pack, right? And that line didn't mean anything to me before, but that is the Marine Corps, right? It takes that one individual to instill the same values over and over and over again. And it makes the pack stronger. And because we have this ethos and these values, and we share them with such passion, that strength goes from the entire pack to the individual too. And it's just reinforcing. So I didn't probably say that eloquently, but I think I'll stop because I'm talking a lot again.
Well, we'll give Paul a chance to jump in and continue. So what I'm going to do is let Paul finish some of that up and share your joint experience together. And then I'm going to kind of pivot over to Operation Gratitude. And then we'll get with that. And then we'll come back in the end to some of the takeaways, some of the things you're talking about here, but all those qualities, both in the Marine Corps, but also the ones that you're implementing in Operation Gratitude, serving people today in a community, in a civilian environment, all those qualities that I think America needs more of, that and if both of you can share those, because I think besides the actual work you do, it's the values and the things that you give through that work that's even more important. So I want you to both definitely share both of that at the end as we come back as to some takeaways that everybody can take away from this. But Paul, let me jump to you and let you take over and kind of fill up on Kevin. He's on mute.
Kevin and I are gonna. We bet a beer on who would be on mute and do that. I guess I owe him a beer. I think it's important to recognize, and I'll talk about Marines, but this is the same thing for Army, for the Navy, for the Air Force, the same thing for police and fire, and a lot of walks of life, right? In the Marine Corps specifically, we go out, our recruiting teams go out and they find young men and women of character. Right? They're not just grabbing a kid off the street. They find young men and women of character, those who want to serve. And then we bring them in and we make them Marines, right? We don't teach them how to Marines. We don't train, we make them Marines, right? It's a culture that Kevin talked about. But it's important to recognize they are men and women of character, right? That's who we look for. And that goes to this idea of service. And a lot of people in this country don't get it because they don't know people who serve. They watch a movie or they make their own interpretation. But there was a time in our country where the military maybe was the employer of last resort, right? We hear all those stories, and we even have jodies that we sing when we run, go to war or go to jail. Judges make those decisions in the 50s and the 60s. Hey, young man, you join the Marine Corps, I'm sending you to jail. That's not the Marine Corps today. That's not the Army today. That's not the Navy or the Air Force, right? Young men and women of character want to serve. It's not an employer of the last resort. And I would say the same is true from the firefighters and the police officers and the EMTs that I've met over just my year and a half here with Operation Gratitude. I think we should recognize that first, and that's what makes our servicemen and women so valued. And you talk about attributes, John, that they come in the Marine Corps with. This sense of service is huge, but it's also this sense of selflessness, right? These are not selfish men and women. They're not coming to make a bunch of money. They're not, some are coming in for a little bit of glory, but really it's about glory to serve their nation, right? And, but there's this selfless nature about them when they come in. And they learn that early on, right? To give back to their brothers and sisters, not just in the Corps, but across the country, right? And then, of course, our leaders are taught from day one. When they go to OCS, the motto at OCS, ductus exemplo, right? Leadership by example. So we're taught to lead from the front, lead by example. And that, like Kevin said before with our battalion, 2nd Battalion, 10th Marines, that gets pushed down to the lowest level. And that's why you see these acts of bravery and that you read about in the history books in places like Fallujah that Kevin talked about, and those acts of bravery aren't because somebody is born a hero. It's because they join with this sense of service and it grows and develops inside their soul. And then when they get in a situation in a horrific type event, they just respond. They don't react. They respond. It's a calculated response that's in their training and it's in their psyche and it's in their soul. And then they move forward, right? And they move forward to serve and protect. Really, it comes down to, in those situations, the man or woman to their left and to their right, right? Those are the attributes. And that is the character of, I would say, the vast majority of our servicemen and women, right? Their character of service is one of selfless service, leading by example for our nation. And I think if we all recognize that in them and think about 9/11, right? Think about those firefighters with everything in their intellect, every emotion in them would tell them, run away from the fire, right? In combat, situation, don't run towards the sound of the guns. What are you, crazy? But those firefighters, as we know, and we see, and we saw, and we see in the history books, or on those videotapes or newsreels that you'll watch what happened, they went to the sound of the guns. They went into the heat of the fire. They went into the smoke and the rubble, right? That's that selfless service. And that is something we can't forget, right? Today was a solemn day, but as I looked around me and I drove through DC, we got to be careful, right? The sense wasn't there that I've seen in years past. And I don't know if it's COVID-19. I don't know what's going on in the kind of the political environment today, but we can never forget the men and women that served since the founding of our nation, the men and the women that served in places like Japan and Germany during World War I and World War II, and the men and women that served in Korea and Vietnam, and the men and women that served in the desert, in the 90s through today. We can't forget those men and women, and we certainly can't forget the men and women who rushed to the sound of the guns in New York City on 9/11, right? So it's that same bit of senseless service that draws young men and women today to serve their community. And they serve their community in the Marine Corps. They serve their community in the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and the Coast Guard, the National Guard, our reserves in the military, but they also serve their communities right here at home, putting on the uniform of the mighty blue, right? Strapping on a vest to go to work every day, kissing their kids goodbye, kissing their spouse goodbye. And they literally rush to the sound of the guns, right? To keep us all safe. And we certainly can't forget that.
Well, I think, Paul, both of those things are powerful distinctions that you point out. One is the nature of the military today, as applied in the Marine Corps in particular, but the military today, that you're going and you're picking people who have that quality that you're able to then turn into Marines. Because I think part of our society still thinks it's people are just going there for money or they're going there for a job. They don't realize how it's changed. They really don't, the majority of people in our society, because they don't have any real experiences with it. That's why. And then the other side of that distinction that you make about them being a group of selfless people who run towards the fire, who run towards situations of danger to serve others. That selflessness is such an incredible quality. And once again, I don't think our society understands or appreciates that enough as to what that group of people, whether they're in the military or first responders, what they do. They just don't appreciate it. And they also, I don't think, appreciate that the majority of the military are, you come back with skills as leaders, skills that affect all our society in every way, from entrepreneurship to corporations to CEOs, all the things that people who come out of the military offer. So because our society Hollywood tends to portray it as the people who come out of the military are all wounded mentally, and that it's a damaged group of people. And there are people who obviously suffer from PTS. But in the main, the majority of the people who come out of the military, like yourself and like so many others, are leaders who contribute to the greatness of our society. And that too is, I think, lost in our day and age, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. The last thing I'll say is that, the Marine Corps, we say we return to society, right? After your time in the Marine Corps, whether it's 4 years or 40 years, a better citizen equipped to continue that service, right? So, and some do, some struggle with, the mental, emotional, and the physical scars of war, right? Of service. And that's no different in our other service communities too, whether it's the, police, fire, EMT, or even our medical communities and the stuff that they deal with, right? So we have to remember that too. But John, they're not broken, right? And
that's right.
It's important to recognize that as well, right? And they're not damaged.
That's right.
They have wounds, right? They have wounds that, as a nation, we need to, help them recover from. Yeah,
absolutely, 100%.
And we will see the same thing with first responders and doctors and nurses now who are responding to COVID. I think what I would love for people to know who are listening or watching is something that FDR said once. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's rather the assessment that something is more important than fear. And what I want people to understand about that is young people who make a decision to serve our country in the military or as first responders are doing that because they think our country is important. and the people around them are important. So when you talk to, I mean, everyone I talk to who I consider a hero, and there are a lot of them, and they tell me their stories, they're afraid, but they have the courage to do that because they assess there's something more important than that fear. And that more important is this country and the people that are judging them for the wounds that they bring back from war. And some of them are facing these wounds because they demonstrate exceptional courage, right? So I really think that going back to the term courage is important because the people who make a decision to serve in my mind are courageous anyway, especially some of the police officers, firefighters, and EMTs that we've spoken to over the last few days here in Washington, D.C. in the lead up to 9/11. But I spent 3 years of my life starting a nonprofit and running a nonprofit that was focused on getting veterans jobs in the private sector. And the stigma that's associated with people leaving the service, we've made great strides toward. We can't take a step back. So I appreciate you bringing that up, John.
And that was the group Hiring Our Heroes that you started in 2011, correct?
That's right.
Right. Excellent. So I'm going to use that to transition from that organization to transition into Operation Gratitude. And maybe you can kind of tell, both of you can tell us a little bit about the history of Operation Gratitude. I have a little video, I think it's 3 minutes, that I'd like to share after you do that. It's from 2014, but it shows the energy and all the people back. And that was kind of when I in that period of time, I was up in the Armory doing packing with people, and that's where I met some of the incredible, great people up at Operation Gratitude. But I think it'll give people some of the what was created that you continue to now take into a new era. And we'll talk about how you're functioning in this COVID era and also what's going to happen in the future, because this is a period, but it's going to change again. And you're going to, you're leading the organization through this, but you're also going to lead it into the future. So maybe you can just tell us the story of the start of Operation Gratitude. Tell us that story, tell the audience that story, and give us a little of that. Then I'll play the video so people can see you guys in action.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the story is part of the reason we're here. And again, I say Paul and I have a lot in common. I think Paul and I are excited and honored to be part of Operation Gratitude and the next chapter for the organization and the foundation that our founder, Carolyn Blaschick, built. Because we believe that what Carolyn did and all of the volunteers like you who go back all the way to 2003 built the foundation that we can now take the next step as an organization and go beyond saying thank you for your service, make that a start of a conversation that leads to a meaningful connection, that builds understanding, that builds empathy, and that ultimately builds bridges between grateful Americans and our military veterans and first responders. When I first came to Operation Gratitude, I came because I heard Carolyn's story, and I did a 30-minute call. I was supposed to do a 30-minute call like this. It turned into 2 hours, and before I knew it, I took the job back in December of 2017. Her story is so compelling, and it actually ties to September 11th beautifully, because Carolyn Blaschick grew up in New York City, and she was deeply impacted by the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Operation Gratitude exists largely because of that experience as someone who grew up in New York, lived in LA, and again, was deeply affected. But one of my favorite parts of the story is that the very next day, she tried to enlist in the United States Marine Corps, but she was in her mid-40s at the time and the lawyer by trade. And the Marine, of course, politely said, "Sorry, ma'am, we're kind of busy right now, and I'm not sure what else he said, but the minimum age requirement may come up in that conversation." But Carolyn, to her credit, went to the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, tried to enlist there, and she heard the same thing. So she started to volunteer at a USO lounge. And 18 months later, you fast forward, one Saturday, a young soldier walked in, clearly down in the dumps, despondent, and he asked to see a chaplain. And there was no chaplain on duty on a Saturday, and he was getting ready to get on a plane to go back to Iraq, literally 20 minutes later. And he spilled his guts to Carolyn and shared with her that he had been home on emergency leave, He was back for 2 weeks because he was attending his sole surviving parent's funeral, his mom's funeral. And while he was back, his wife left him, and he had lost his only infant son to a sudden illness. And he literally had no one in his life. And he said to Carolyn, I'm going back to Iraq, and I just know I'm not coming home, but it doesn't matter because no one would care. And Carolyn wanted to show him, even though we've never been able to make contact with him or figure out, how to get a hold of him since that time. She went home that night, gathered a few soccer moms. They went to Costco, and they made the first 4 care packages around her dining room table and sent those off the day the invasion of Iraq started. And a grassroots movement was born. 6 weeks later, her entire house is flooded with boxes. 17 years later, on February 29th of this year, Paul and I joined 1,000 volunteers, and we assembled 15,000 care packages with 600,000 individual items, to include handmade scarves, paracord bracelets, handwritten letters. 15,000 care packages, 1,000 people in 3 hours, right? That's a grassroots movement. And we've been doing that ever since. We've been in 9 cities over the last 16 months leading up to COVID, replicating what's been built in Los Angeles so that other people join this movement. So I'll let you share the video now.
Well, you can talk over it. I'm going to let it, as we see it, I'm going to not do any voice, but you'll see what's going on, and you can begin to share, because this was in 2014. And at that point, 1 million packages had, since 2003 to 2014, over 1 million packages. And this shows you a little of what's going on in the background. So feel free to continue to talk over it as this.
Yeah, so what you see there, to my point, is happening all over the country now. We, in 9 cities, one of them twice in the 16 months leading up to COVID, San Antonio, Jacksonville, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, Nashville, Cincinnati, San Diego, and every month in LA, just like you see there, bringing grateful Americans together to express appreciation. But what we did in those cities, and what we do in Los Angeles, John, you've seen it, we bring community together, right? And next to civilian families are military families. And next to those military families are first responders and their families. And in 8 of those 9 cities outside of LA, we delivered a care package. 40,000 of the 100,000 care packages that were produced in those 9 cities by 5,000 volunteers who did this for the very first time, in 8 of those 9 cities were delivered to every police officer, firefighter, and EMT. And we saw people laughing and singing and dancing and talking and making connections. Starting with saying thank you for your service, now we created a spark, right? We sparked a bond. And our mission is to forge bonds, is to go back to those cities again and again and again and connect civilians directly with military and their families, veterans and their families, and first responders and their families. Now think about what you just said, 1 million care packages in the first 11 years. In the next 3 years, through December 2017, we did another 1 million. And since I joined the organization 2.5 years ago, we're already at 900,000. We'll probably get, in 3 years to that 3rd million before the end of the year. And that the care package number is great, right? It's terrific, but it's not just the care package. Those 2.9 million people who we've impacted, think about the snowball effect, right? Think about every mom, dad, brother, sister, cousin, aunt, uncle that felt better because we made that connection with their service member, with their veteran, with their wounded hero and caregiver, with their recruit graduate, with their first responder. Think about how they felt. We've touched tens of millions of lives. And think about the volunteers. Operation Gratitude, make no mistake about it, is the largest nonprofit in the country for hands-on volunteerism. We had 1 million volunteers last year alone. And we took that foundation, and during COVID-19, when everything hit the fan, we thought we were going to have to shut down. We pivoted. And since COVID-19 started, on March 22nd, I did a call with Paul that Thursday night when California issued the stay-at-home order. we thought we were going to have to shut down and furlough employees. Since that time, we launched virtual volunteerism, and we launched a jumbo care package program where we sent pallets of items and let volunteers at the local level in small groups break it down in some cases. We have impacted 350,000 frontline responders and deployed troops. 350,000. And this is since March 22nd, John. We have people in 3 weeks, knitters and crocheters, in 3 weeks, 680 knitters and crocheters make 8,500 scarves. I mean, think about that. Think about what we did for those people, the sense of purpose we gave them. In the course of 3 weeks, 1,300 people made 41,000 paracord bracelets. Think about what we did for them and their families when they sent those bracelets in. And this goes on and on and on. And what we're seeing across the country with COVID-19 and our support of frontline responders is we're not just helping them, we're helping everyday Americans find that sense of purpose and give them hope. And that's where we're at as an organization.
Well, you know, I obviously the name of the organization, what a apt name, Operation Gratitude. And, you know, I personally, I live with a thing where every day I get up and I write a page of all the things I'm grateful in a gratitude journal. And I've been doing that for years because I think living with gratitude is probably one of the greatest gifts I've been given. When somebody said, you know, if you would take every day and look at all the things you're grateful for, it'll change your life forever. And it did. It gave me that appreciation that no matter how hard things were, no matter what kind of challenges I'm facing, look at all the things to be grateful for. And when you start your day that way, it puts everything in perspective. And then, you know, in your case of a group like Operation Gratitude, it's not just thinking about all the things you're grateful for and writing down what you're grateful for, but it's taking gratitude to the level of actually putting it into practice and doing that gratitude for others and serving others. So it becomes an active involvement, which I think too is a gift to not only the people who get things from you, but it is a major gift to the people who contribute. Because if anything for them, it makes them feel a sense of purpose and mission. And it's one of the greatest things in the world, I think, to live a life like that. Because when you live a life without a purpose and when you live a life without gratitude, you're missing so much of what life's about. You really are. And it's sad. So your organization and what you guys are doing with Operation Gratitude takes it to a level that I think we need more of on so many more levels. And that's what you're doing by growing it, especially during this period of COVID where too many people have become afraid. Too many people haven't taken that quote that you said earlier from FDR on courage, that, you know, it isn't not being afraid, but it's knowing that you have a bigger purpose where you're willing to step forward. And that those lessons, I think, are lessons for all of us right now. And I think that's what you two guys in particular and your organization exemplifies. So tell us a little bit more of right now. I mean, we were talking earlier before it started, some of the things you were doing today. And if you could just share some of the stories about what you were doing today and some of the people you met today to just, once again, give us that reality of a story for somebody who maybe hasn't experienced something like that and how important it is on a daily basis for someone.
I'll go real quickly because I know Paul wanted to add something to what you said about the gratitude piece. And I mean, it's been an amazing 4 days, John. I think you hit on a key point. You know, I've been in the nonprofit space for 9 years. This is the third nonprofit I ran. And there's just too many people who think that problems can be solved by talking from podiums or changing policies or taking surveys. Operation Gratitude is about letting actions speak louder than words. And we don't have to talk about what needs to be done because we're just doing it. And we realized,
Amen.
And we've realized this for 17 years, but particularly during COVID, they can't stop, so we won't stop. We use that term all the time. And for 4 days,
wow,
4 days, we found a way to serve 20,000 deployed service members and first responders. 12,000 deployed service members all over the world are going to get care packages from Operation Gratitude, to include these paracord bracelets and letters. That's going to mean something right now because their deployments have been extended. 8,831 first responders in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Arlington, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the three cities, the three areas that were attacked by terrorists on 9/11, are receiving those 8,831 care packages over the last 4 days too. So we went to the DC National Guard Armory under Paul's leadership, under Rich Headley's leadership, another retired Marine, Master Sergeant, and we brought in small groups of 20 people at a time and made those 8,831,000 Operation Gratitude care packages in a special design bag, like a race bag that you can drop and go and just get things done quickly. I'm telling you, John, people worked hard. And we made deliveries ourselves we met over the last 3 days, 2 firefighters that were there at the Pentagon on 9/11. We met a young captain in Arlington Fire Department named Justin Torelli, who was a rookie on 9/11/2001. It was the first day he drove a ladder truck, John. I mean, this is a hero. He is driving a ladder truck. He's going to a city in Virginia called Roslyn. They get the call. He's sitting next to a 35-year veteran of the fire department, literally smoking a cigarette and going left, right, telling him where to turn, because Justin had never been to the Pentagon. And 3 times with his firefighters, they tried to get to the building with the hoses, but they were pushed back by the flames.
Wow.
He was crawling on rocks, he told us. And he looked up and he saw a fighter jet. And he realized that this wasn't just a fire at the Pentagon, that our nation was being attacked. And he got up and did it again and again and again. That's courage. We met an assistant chief for the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority who literally was on the roof on 9/11 and was part of the unit. If you ever see the iconic photo of these 2 yellow trucks that spray the foam, Paul and I were there yesterday to thank those firefighters that are there today, to include that assistant chief who was on the roof of 9/11. You ever see that photo of the firefighters with the flag hanging down over the Pentagon?
Yeah.
One of those firefighters on top of the roof.
Wow.
And today Paul and I joined police officers in Washington Metropolitan Police Department, and affirmed for us that what we're doing is more important than ever, and we will not stop. Same thing in New York City. 1,400 firefighters in FDNY got our care packages today, and the small police and volunteer fire department in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, too. Every police officer, every firefighter, and every EMT in Washington, D.C. And Arlington are getting our care packages as well. So we've been busy, but
yes, you have. Yes, you have.
Heroes like that is pretty cool.
Paul wanted to jump in on gratitude, but also some stories. Go ahead, Paul.
You talk about Operation Gratitude, and even Carolyn will say, wow, I don't know how that name just was perfect for the organization, right? And she's so happy, I think, that she selected that name when she started this organization. But gratitude, John, is not a one-way street, right? It's this circle of gratitude, and we're finding more and more that saying thank you for your service obviously is just the beginning of a conversation that brings people together and allows them to make a meaningful connection. And through that connection, they share stories of service and sacrifice, many times through acts of service, right? These volunteers come in and they're serving, right, in their own way by a service project, making bracelets, writing letters, putting care packages together, organizing a donation drive in their hometown, their schools, their churches, their places of work, and bringing communities together to learn about each other. And they'll say thank you for your service to a service member. And the service member will look them back in the eye and say, thank you for supporting me, for supporting us, for learning about my family. And it's that circle of gratitude, right? And that exchange back and forth. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's a repeat engagement over and over and over again in these cities that Kevin talked about. And that's why we see it so strong in LA. We got to bring that grassroots movement, that like we're doing all across this country, to let people engage with those communities, to talk to a firefighter or a police officer about what their daily life is like. What does it mean for a police officer who goes to work in the morning and kisses his kids goodbye or their spouse goodbye? And we've heard stories from police right here in our own hometowns. In Kevin's town of Arlington, Virginia, we talked to a police officer that talked about some of his officers that were going to work recently after all the craziness that's happening in this country. And they were late to work, John, because their children were barricading their homes and saying, Mommy, Daddy, don't go to work today, right? These 8-year-old children, because I'm afraid you won't come home because of what I'm seeing and hearing it, on the playground or on TV, right? And we have to recognize that the men and women who serve this country, whether it's overseas with the military or right here at home in our own neighborhoods, they're making a sacrifice every day, and their families are making a sacrifice, right? So that level of gratitude, this opportunity to impact, well more than 20,000, directly we're going to impact 20,000 military members and first responders over the 9/11 commemoration period. But we're also impacting their families and their friends and their communities, and showing that not Kevin and I, right, but all these volunteers that give their time, their talent, and their treasure to Operation Gratitude. And then in turn, we give all of that to the members of our community, to build that community, to make the community stronger through acts of service and through the actions that Kevin talked about, right?
Well, I've had a few experiences with you guys as well. And, we did an event where you put together some packages for the American Legion Post 43 in Hollywood that I belong to. I'm a son of the Legion there. And you guys brought in all these packages for everybody, which was a very special night to see, have you guys share that with the people from the Legion. But, I think the other part of this is now more than ever, one of the things I loved about and continue to love about when I would be at Operation Gratitude and doing the boxes and doing all that is the variety of people that just everybody was there, from every ethnic background, men, women, every political background, every religious background, just all kinds of people, white collar, blue collar, just every kind of human being together in an environment of doing something together and finding what we have in common and our unity as humans when we're in service to others, instead of finding ways to find the differences between each other, but instead finding the unity and the commonality. And that's one of the experiences I've always had when I've been at Operation Gratitude, that I think that you provide to people. You give a chance to bring them into an environment that puts them in contact with people who are different than them and who have different attitudes and beliefs and experiences, and yet they're all together doing something good for others. To me, that's just an amazing thing. And I think we need more of that. And that's what you obviously are creating by expanding this throughout the country.
Right. I mean, I don't even have to, you said it perfectly. All I would add is that I've seen it not only in the 9 cities that I described in the assembly days, but I've been part of more than 60 deliveries in 29 other cities. So I've seen the power of what this organization has done and continues to do, and the potential. And we will not take our foot off the pedal when it comes to taking that next step as an organization, because we've heard it on both sides of a divide that exists between civilians and our military, veterans, and first responders. And clearly, if we have 1 million Americans who supported us, that divide is not a lack of appreciation. That divide is a lack of understanding, a lack of empathy in both directions, walking in someone else's shoes, right? It's a great term to use. And really all we have to do are make those connections. And for the same reasons, you said what you said about every race, color, creed, religion, politic, every walk of life you can think of, right? Walk of life, walk in someone else's shoes. People don't see that when they're together serving.
Correct.
Paul came up with a great term the other day on a call, and I don't like to say that because I like them when they're my ideas, but solidarity of service, right? That the common thread about Operation Gratitude is not just gratitude in both directions. It's service, because when a civilian or someone who never met someone in the military or first responder is serving as well, and they start to talk in a way that is fun. I mean, think about the assembly days that you've been to recently, John, even in LA, but all over the country, we're doing the same thing. We're bringing service members and their families. We're bringing veterans and their families. We're bringing first responders and their families, and they're standing side by side too. And they're every race, color, creed, religion, and politic.
That's right.
And they're dancing and singing and laughing and sharing, and they're getting to know each other. And what they find out when they're in the assembly line packing care packages, they're finding out that, oh, we share the same neighbors. Oh, we go to the same restaurant. Oh, our kids go to the same school. And there it is. There is no divide. There is no divide. And what are they then? They're Americans, right?
Absolutely.
They're Americans. And Paul is right. Driving around the Pentagon, going to the event today, going to the Armory, going to see firefighters and EMTs and police officers, it feels different this 9/11. And everyone's got to take a second and think about what makes this country great. And what we just talked about is America, right? It is what makes this country great. And that's what this organization is going to focus on, is bringing people together. And it starts with a simple act of gratitude. It starts with a care package. It starts with saying thank you for your service. I say it all the time now. It's not just a care package. It's not just saying thank you for your service. Don't let anyone ever tell you that that doesn't mean anything. It's about creating an understanding about what that word means on both sides of the commonality or that solidarity that Paul talked about. And that's what we're going to do. And it's going to be fun.
Well, I read somewhere on one of your things too, this metaphor, and especially going through this period of COVID, that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I know as a New Yorker, we always used to goof around saying when there's light at the end of the tunnel, that means there's a truck coming at you from New Jersey. But that's how we saw light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, maybe we're two trucks coming from New Jersey.
I think so. But you're bringing light, and that's the other thing. You're bringing light, man. And even if it's coming from New Jersey, that's a great thing, because you're bringing light to the darkness. And reality is there is light at the end of the tunnel. And this period, COVID period, will end, and we'll get through this. We'll get stronger, and part of it is because of what everybody's doing, and what you're doing is that you didn't let it stop you. You pivoted and you found another way to continue to serve and lead. And that's really what it takes when you get hit with an obstacle. You find a way to pivot and get around the obstacle. You don't let the obstacle stop you. And so this is not the end of obstacles in life. They're going to continue forever. I mean, that's just part of life. But each time you get hit with them, we have to pivot. And what you're saying, what you just said was real powerful. But, we're all in it together, and you're not going to stop. You're going to keep going. And I think that's a powerful message. And then just to, kind of get towards wrapping up, is, to talk a little bit about what you are doing, what some of your plans are, how people can get involved in the 9 cities. Obviously, people can find you on your website. They can find you on Facebook. They can find you on Twitter at OpGratitude. There's so many ways to find you. But, what would you share as to what you're doing and how more people can get involved? Because I think the more we grow this, the better it is for everybody. It's better it is to come out the other side, and that we're going to find light at the end of the tunnel.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah. So, I guess I'll warn you first, because once you get involved with Operation Gratitude, you're going to want to do more and more, and more, right? And right now we're still under the COVID-19 restrictions, but we have this program that Kevin talked about, virtual volunteerism. And there's a way to connect with the communities that we serve through that virtual volunteerism, whether it's to make a paracord bracelet or write a letter of support to a deployed service member, to a veteran, to a first responder, or to one of our healthcare heroes. And you can go to our website, you can click the button that says get involved and learn more about virtual volunteerism, but also recognize what we're going to do for the rest of this year, for 2020. And one, we have our Halloween Candy Give Back program, right? So this year, don't know what Halloween's going to look like, but every year, it started with dentist office, now it's communities nationwide that either send candy to Operation Gratitude in LA, and then we distribute it to deployed troops, to military veterans and first responders, but also to connect directly with your community. A doctor's office or a dentist's office in Boston, for example, will collect candy and deliver it to first responders in their community or veterans groups in their community. And then Veterans Day is coming, and we're going to make 20,000 care packages that we're going to deliver to veterans all across this country. And we're aiming for at least one, if not groups of veterans in all 50 states this year. because we didn't talk a lot about veterans today, John, but they're an intricate part of our community as Americans, and we can't forget what they've done, right? Kevin talked about born on their backs early on in the conversation today, and we have to show them that we care about their commitment of service to our nation. And as you know, many veterans, young and old, continue to serve in their communities. So on Veterans Day, we're going to recognize them for their service to bring people together virtually and in small groups in some cases to make those 20,000 care packages. And then, of course, we're never going to forget our deployed service members. So as we get closer to the holiday period, we're going to come together yet again, probably in LA and here in DC, and we're going to make 20,000 care packages for deployed troops. And we're going to figure out how to do it, John. And we're going to make sure that those men and women who are away from their families during the holidays are properly recognized for their service and their sacrifice. And we're going to reach out to them and show them that America cares about what they're doing and their brothers and sisters that are deployed downrange. So how can you get involved? Go to operationgratitude.com, check out our website. And again, virtual volunteerism, a donation small or large to help us send these care packages during the Veterans Day and holiday period. And then look for Operation Gratitude to come to one of your neighborhoods in 2021. Because once COVID-19 is behind us, we're going to be in that truck, John, and we're going to be moving 100 miles an hour towards the sound of the guns. And we're going to go to these communities, and we're going to engage with the communities of grateful Americans and their military and first responder heroes. Bring those communities together through acts of gratitude. And we're going to say thank you for your service, and then we're going to talk, and we're going to have conversations and make that meaningful connection. And those communities, John, you're going to see them. They're going to build stronger and stronger and stronger. And in the end, and it may sound like hyperbole, but it's not, this will make America stronger.
And just two other things. We have pledged recently, and we have an advisory council called the Bridge Council, Bridging the Divide Through Gratitude and Engagement. And this has been going on for 2 years. Something that we initiated when I first started. We made a pledge on the 2-year anniversary, which happens to be September 11th today, when that council started 2 years ago. And I did the first delivery to first responders in Jacksonville, Florida. We made a pledge, any community that reaches out to Operation Gratitude to bridge divides, we're going to be there. And I promise you, when we make a pledge like that, we're going to live up to it. Now, it may not be a service project like what you see in LA, but listen, we can do something small to spark that bond too. And let what we've seen in other communities happen. In Baltimore, we did an assembly day. 8 weeks later, the police department invited our volunteers back to pack backpacks for a back to school event for kids in underprivileged communities in Baltimore. That can happen anywhere, John, and that's gonna make a difference. And the last thing they announced for your viewers before you wrap up is we have an ambassador program, and this is a select group of people. You mentioned Bob Donovan as an ambassador. We actually have 6 or 7 ambassadors in key cities across the country, from Philadelphia to San Antonio to Ohio to Nashville. And we're proud to announce that John Duffy is joining that group today as an ambassador for Operation Gratitude, as if you weren't already. But that means we're going to get more work out of you too, John. You're going to be a truck from New Jersey too.
Well, I know you. I'm honored, and when you mentioned it to me, I know it means more work, which is cool. And but I think the other side of it, I'm honored and blessed that you would offer that to me. And knowing both of you guys, you're truly 2 of the most amazing people that I've met in my lifetime. So I'm 100% down with doing that. I know you had a different name, OG Champions, but whatever the name is, you know, the reality of it is basically being there to do the service. And I'm just honored and blessed that you would even consider me to help you out with that, because I think your mission is so important now. Maybe even, you know, in the beginning it was very important, and now I think it's taken on another sense of importance on another level, and that level of spreading through the community and spreading through the country, you know, that sense of unity and gratitude and communication, and that we're all Americans in this together, and we can help each other whatever ways that we can do it. So you're moving that to another level, and the 2 of you have done some amazing leadership to get it there. So once again, I'm I'm honored. I mean, like I said, God keeps having a different plan for me because I don't plan any of this stuff, So obviously he knows things I don't. So I'm always good with it. So I appreciate you guys. I thank you so much for what you've done, both in the military and also now, and what you continue to do, because you're making a difference in a way that we need that difference. So I'm honored to be part of you. As long as you don't get me to try and run a marathon with you guys, I'm all right. That I'm not sure I'm ready for. But everything up to that, maybe.
Well, we're getting up early tomorrow to run together, so we get a chance to work even on Saturdays. I think I see Paul more than I see my wife. So
when is the Marine Corps Marathon? When is it?
Well, they're doing it virtually now, so you can run it the last week of October all the way to the Marine Corps' birthday. So this may be the first time I ever run a marathon where it's not 70 degrees or hotter at the finish, because we'll be able to pick the date.
Yeah, that's probably that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, you can get good weather. It's half the battle. But
indeed,
we really appreciate this opportunity, John.
Well, I'm going to share this on my Facebook page and on my YouTube channel. And once again, for anybody who's watching it, besides all the things that Kevin and Paul has suggested, ways for you to get involved, obviously go to the website, operationgratitude.com, the Facebook page, the Twitter page, donate, get involved, ask them to come to your city, all those things. But share this video when I post it, share it on your pages. The more people that have a chance to see their story and see the story of service, I think, will impact other people's lives, and that'll be a great thing. So once again, thank you guys for taking the time. Thank you for being on the show with me, and I appreciate it. And we'll push this out there, and best with your run. I mean, I'll go walk and I'll think of you, but I'm going to do the walk instead of the run. But it was a pleasure, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Have a great weekend, John. Thank you.
Best to you guys and your family.
Yeah, you too.
Semper Fi, John.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.